Hello and welcome to Gems of the Alshich Part 2. This week's seder, the Parsha, is the Parsha Tazria. So if you have your Chumash in front of you, you will know by a quick read that it starts off by talking about the birth of a male child and the birth of a female child. The Alshich connects that to the second element of the seder when it goes on to talk about somebody who gets the strange disease called Tzoras. But before I get to the Alshich, I cannot resist telling you what somebody called the Shem Mishmil, one of the great Hasidic giants, I think my favorite Hasidic commentator, points out here, which is absolutely brilliant. You all know, just by looking at it, we can look at it together. Maybe I'll just read this so we get the idea. It says, at the beginning of the Parsha, V'yadaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Speak to Moshe, and he should say, Daber el Bnei Israel, speak to the Jewish people lemor, to say, Isha ki Tazria, a woman who is Tazria, let's call it gets pregnant. More complicated translation. But Yod Zochen gives birth to a male child, but Thomas Shivas Yamim. So she's going to be Tommy. The word Tommy is usually translated as impure. The entire Jewish concept of Tuma is something that applies when there's a brush of death. The ultimate Tuma is a dead body, a dead human body. Anything that in any way connects to death, then that is that's where Tuma comes in. So if a woman gives birth, the Yod becomes pregnant, the Yod Zochen gives birth to a male child, but Thomas, she will become impure for Shivas Yamim. Kimei Nida, so just like the story of Nida, that's the amount of time that she becomes impure. So 7 days after her birth. And then B'yam Hashmini, on the 8th day, then it's Bris Milah. Yom Sarlasai, then is going to be the circumcision of Yom Shloshim Yomim, and a period of 33 days, as it were, to get rid of this tumor situation, and then she's able to come to the Beis HaMikdash, offer a sacrifice. Life starts again. If it's a female child, though, then everything is multiplied by 2. Then it's 14 days of tumor, and then 66 days. So it's precisely twice the amount. A superficial examination of that would lead to assume that men, boys, males are on a higher level than women. Women provide or produce twice as much tuna. So listen to this is absolutely brilliant. The Shem Mishmil quotes the Kotzker Rebbe, one of the giants and early Hasidic authorities, who ask, why should there be any tumah, any negativity whatsoever that flows from the birth of a child? The bringing into this world of a soul is a pure thing. Not only that, we believe, Kabbalistically speaking, that the ultimate midwife, the person who delivers a child into the world, is the Almighty Himself. There's an angel inside the womb teaching the child Torah. So why should this incredible holy explosion of or combination of holy elements, an angel, God Himself bringing the child into the world, and the soul, and then it would be associated with Tumah? So this was the Kotzker says. It's very enigmatic. It's just a couple of words. It's Va'achakach. He says, so what happens after that? What does that mean? So it's very simple. We all know that in science, and incidentally, everything in the physical world has a spiritual parallel. We know that in science there's a phrase, an adage, nature abhors a vacuum. That if there is a vacuum, something has been removed, and something will rush in to fill it. Take a glass jar, light a flame underneath it, so all the oxygen disappears. You've created a vacuum. As soon as you take away the flame, new air rushes in. So he says it's precisely and specifically because there was so much holiness inside the womb, accompanying that child into the world, that there's Tumah Achakach. It's the Tumah that comes afterwards. Because when the child is born, then that holiness removes itself from the woman's body, there's a vacuum, and negative forces rush in to fill that vacuum. Now the astonishing thing is that if it's a boy child, then the negative forces last, to get rid of them, last 7 days and 33, that's 40 days altogether. But for a female child, it's 80 days altogether. And by definition, it has to be that there is twice as much holiness that was produced when there was a female child there than a male child. Quite the opposite to how we understood that, or how the world may understand that. woman Judaism quite simply says they're on a higher spiritual level from the, as they say in America, the get-go, from the very inception, and indeed conception, than boys are. Okay, but what does the Alshich have to say? The Alshich wants to focus, I mean, he does talk about that, but if we get to Perek Yud Gimel, this is straight after the birth of the child, or the children, and the process of that, then it says, V'yadaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, al Moshe bel Aaron lemor, Odom, a man, ki yeh ba'or b'sora, if he's God on his flesh, then it says, se'es, asapachas, beheres, these are all symptoms, physical symptoms, and signs that he has Tzoras. So the first thing the Alshich wants to point out is the word that says Odom. Now here's a very important rule. There is no such thing in biblical Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, as it's known, as the Holy Tongue, as a synonym. Anybody who has anything to do with writing will know there are, if you're stuck in a piece of writing, and I write all the time, if you're stuck and you're looking for another word, to not use the same word over and over again. English is full of synonyms, and it's easy enough in a computer program, in Word or whatever, just to click on a mouse, and it'll give you very many synonyms. There are no synonyms in the Lashon HaKodesh. Many words for Iman, Ish, Gibor, etc. But Odom is the highest level of a man. So the first thing the Alshich is trying to point out is that when somebody's on the very highest spiritual level, then if he's done something wrong, something negative, made a mistake, and the usual one is Lashon Hora, then that will be rejected by his soul inside, because of an incredibly elevated soul, and push to the outside so that you can actually see it. This concept, therefore, is not a spiritual leprosy, as it's usually translated in the Bible. It's not leprosy. We all know what leprosy is. Very different disease, very different symptoms. This is something called Tzoras. It's unique, and it indicates that the person has done something wrong. But what sort of person? Only somebody at the highest spiritual level. And then the body rejects it. The body, as it were, is so refined that it can't take that. Or the soul is so refined, I should say. We, sadly, we don't have Tzoras today. There's no such concept that is the spiritual disease, because just nobody is on that level. And as a consequence, therefore, we're talking for somebody to be in the highest spiritual level. What happens to that person? He's locked away for 7 days. Well, first of all, he goes and shows it to the Cohen, and again, that's an indication that it's not a physical disease. The Torah has very strict and loud words to say about being sick. Go to a doctor. But that's not what happens in this case. You've got to take your physical symptoms and show it to a Cohen. Why? Because it's a spiritual disease, then you go to a spiritual doctor. We're now looking at what caused this disease. Why did this thing happen to me? The fellow is then locked up in his own for 7 days. It's a process of 7 days of introspection, and the Hebrew word is teshuvah. To isolate what I did wrong. The whole process of teshuvah is I did something wrong, so you've got to identify it. And after that, you've got to regret it. Then after that, you've got to undertake not to repeat it. And then, of course, the last one is to put right anything that you did, the effects of the thing that caused you to be in there in the first place. If I can put them right, I'm going to put them right. So he's invited to spend 7 days alone. The Hebrew word is boidus, engaging in introspection, meditation perhaps, and looking at what did I do wrong. Then reconciling himself to his mistakes and to God, putting them right again, then he comes out. We're talking here about a spiritual disease, spiritual consequences, but it only applies to somebody in the very highest level. The model, however, applies to all of us. If you've done something wrong, if you see consequences, if something, as it were, goes wrong in your life, well, we don't have any Cohen Godel to show our symptoms to, or take our story to, and nor do we have any prophets who would be able to just effectively, as a Cohen, tell you what you did wrong. Then today it's up to us to say, is there anything I could have done wrong that could have provoked that? And then go through this period of introspection, and it might take us a week, of looking and thinking about ourselves, what did I do wrong? And then putting it right again. That applies to everybody. But this disease, Odom, applies to the highest. That's why we don't have Tzoras today, says the Alshich. There's a general consequence that flows from bad behavior. God will let you know. Maybe not as dramatically and as immediately as a highly spiritual person who's called Odom, but for us ordinary people, there's still a residue, a hint, an echo of that process, which allows us to put things right. And that's another little gem from the Alshich. I wish you all a good Shabbos.